Welcome to a new episode of the Dade podcast. I'm Nick Jiménez, and I am joined here by Abraham Mahshie. He is a journalist and is working on a book project that will sort of be a comprehensive look at the world that you've been focused on for quite a while now, which is the world of bullfighting, especially in Spain. We are going to be talking about your experience as a journalist, diving deep into the world of bullfighting, as well as some of your experience as an expat, an American in Spain, and what that experience was like. But first, a word from our episode sponsor. I didn't tell you this was coming. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by, you ready for this? Bandago. Bandago offers affordable, handcrafted, reversible doggo bandanas. Your dog is naked. Everybody's super pissed about it. And this Gainesville, Florida-based company handcrafts your favorite Bandago styles, delivers straight to your front door. Currently, their products are made to order and can be sent domestically and internationally. They are available in extra small, medium, large, and XL. What that means, I'm not sure. I don't know what an XL dog looks like, but there are measurements on buybandago.com. That's B-U-Y, bandago.com. Bandago is spelled B-A-N-D-O-G-G-O.com. Visit there for any promotions and discounts on their Facebook profile, and use promo code DADE20, that's D-A-D-E 20, for 20% off of your first order of Bandago reversible dog bandanas. My dog has one. He looks better with it than without it. And your dog probably will too, because, again, your dog is naked, and that's indecent, and you got to put a bandana on that thing. So...
That sounds great.
All right, so Abraham,
I might just get a dog so I can.
Yeah, just so you can get the dog bandanas.
Yeah, reversible.
Thank you for joining me. We are here at Cigar Snob Magazine headquarters. Cigar Snob, for those of you who are not aware, is where I do my day jobbing, and we are an internationally distributed cigar lifestyle magazine. The benefit of me borrowing this space for interviews is that we have a coffee maker, booze, and cigars that we have access to for these interviews. So those of you who are watching this in video form will have the pleasure of watching us enjoy things that you probably don't get to do at work. So there's that. Tell me a bit, and we, I'm familiar with some of the story, but for the benefit of the people who don't know you, tell me about where you come from in the journalism world, what your background is on that side, and what it was like for you going from, you grew up in Miami, what it was like for you going from Miami to journalism school in the Midwest. We're both alums of the Missouri School of Journalism, and then sort of taking this radically different path in terms of your journalistic interests into this very peculiar culture of Spanish bullfighting. And while you're starting your answer, pass me the lighter.
Sure. Just make sure you pass it back.
Yeah, there you
go. Well, thanks for inviting me out here, Nick. This is really a fun opportunity. I was telling you during the break that I could talk about bullfighting for hours and hours. And actually, I just interviewed a bullfighting historian, Paco Aguado, and we were talking about how bullfighting has changed over the ages and sort of what's happening in Spanish society today. And he said that one of those societal changes is it's becoming less acceptable to talk about bullfighting, and that's one of the great joys of being an aficionado, a fan of bullfighting, is talking about it for hours and hours, and it's just intriguing, it's fascinating, and there's so much to it, and it's high emotion, it's beautiful, it's artistic, it's dramatic, it's scary, it's full of suspense, and that's what drew me to bullfighting. I was working as a correspondent in Quito, Ecuador, in 2006, covering the Rafael Correa election and a few other things, because as a aspiring foreign correspondent with the international news cycle shrinking, I had to look for a lot of different jobs, to a lot of different media outlets to work for, to fix for, to write, report, cover petroleum elections, travel stories, a lot of fun stuff, really great experiences, mainly in Latin America. That's where I wanted to work, because growing up in Miami, I was fascinated with our unique mix of cultures and politics and everything that's happening there. So I worked mainly in South America, Venezuela, Colombia, Argentina, Brazil, Ecuador, and then I've done reporting in most other countries in South America, Central America, some in the Caribbean, a lot of work in the United States, and then most recently 4 years in Spain. And I wrote about 5 years ago. I'll start with Ecuador, right? That's when I first saw my bullfight as an adult, because my grandparents took me to a bullfight when I was 3 years old, and it's my first memory in Mexico City.
3 years old.
3 years old.
Okay.
1982. And I remember La Monumental de Mexico. I just remember those big steps as a little child trying to step up those big steps in this enormous, enormous Plaza de Toros. And then I remember, it just goes to show the high emotion and the impact of what it is to see a bullfight. That these memories would be seared into my brain at such a young age. That I remember the bulls running around. I remember the banderillas being placed, and it must have been. I've still yet to figure out the cartel who was fighting that day, what day exactly it was, but it might have been a mixed fight of rejoneo, which is bullfighting on horseback with bullfighting on foot, because I remember there being horses. I remember there being the banderillas, and I just have glimpses, right? So just by coincidence. Fast forward 25 years, and I'm in Quito, Ecuador, and at the height of the presidential race there, and in Quito at the time, the bullfighting was not prohibited as it is right now. The killing of a bull in Quito is not allowed, although cockfighting is still allowed. And I was a good friend of mine was with Reuters, and we would grab beers and talk shop, talk journalism, politics after work.
Yeah.
And the bullfights were in Quito. The Festival of Quito was happening. I think it was December of 2016 or 2006. And he said, "Well, you want to go to the bullfight?" I said, "Sure." Yeah. And I was kind of broke at the time. I had just been robbed, and I wasn't getting paid on time by some top national, international publications. They did eventually pay me. So he bought the tickets, Barrera, first row.
Oh, wow.
And so you are right there with the action.
Yeah, right up in it.
You can hear the bull breathing. You can, the dirt, you see it flying in the air, the mud, because it was raining.
Yeah.
And the intensity. You see, there's all these quick movements. When you're up higher, sometimes it seems more graceful, like the bull's running, the bullfighter is passing. This choreography is taking place. But when you are there, the intensity of the emotions, the bullfighter yelling to his team members, because they are directing, they are using their capotes to move the bull to one place or to the other place, to get ready for the 3 acts of the bullfight to happen. The tercio de varas, which is when the bullfighter, the picador, comes out on the horse with the lance, and the bullfighter has the capote, the fuchsia colored cape. The second, the tercio de banderillas, where banderilleros, 3 team members who have these sort of wooden spikes with small blades, and then they place them over the top of the bull's horns. And then the third act is tercio de muerte, the killing phase, where the bullfighter finishes in the most artistic way he can with the muleta, the red cloth, tire the bull and prepare it for death.
Yeah.
And it all happens in about 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes tops.
Yeah.
Each bullfighter has 2 bulls. There's 3 bullfighters. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 in order of seniority. And I was there in Quito experiencing, I don't even remember images of specific things that were happening. I just remember the emotion, the emotional impact, and the range of emotions, fear, excitement, suspense, beauty, elegance.
How much of that did you anticipate? Because I think there are a lot of people maybe who don't know how they'll experience a bullfight. I'm one of them, right? I think that that I would be interested in all of that, but I think there are also a lot of people who might anticipate that that it'll be something they'll be more squeamish about. What was your expectation going in, and how did that line up with what you actually felt?
I think no expectations going in. Didn't do research or anything. Didn't look up videos. Didn't really read about it. I knew that there was an anti-Torino movement. I know that it's a tradition. It's a Spanish tradition. It exists in the Americas. It's practiced in 8 countries in the world. And the way it's practiced, the regimented format of the bullfight in Latin America is exactly the same as Spain, as it has been for 150 years.
Right.
And so I went in sort of, open-minded about the experience, and I think that that's really the best way to decide if this is something that you can enjoy or if you're opposed to it. And a lot of people, when I was living in Spain, a lot of Americans and even other foreigners would say, well, I want to go with you because you understand kind of how bullfighting works. And I think that that's really, important to go with someone who understands how it works, And I've asked a lot of bullfighters this question too, and bullfighters and ranchers and business, the plaza directors and that. I say, do you have to go with someone who knows bullfighting to explain it? And some people say, yes, you do, because they can tell you the meaning of different things and what you're looking at. It's like going to a baseball game, right? So well, you can never be bored in a bullfight because, you're facing death at any instant.
Right.
But it's important to understand and to be able to recognize the nuance and to appreciate the beauty, to be able to understand those things that you appreciate even more, like anything. You can spend a lifetime learning to understand and appreciate beauty of bullfighting. But so I went in there sort of open-minded about it, and I encourage anybody who thinks, oh, there's no way I would ever go to a bullfight. They're torturing the animal, they're killing the animal, which there's a lot of arguments against that from veterinarians, and there's studies being done, and we can go into that a little bit if you'd like, but is to just go in there and then make your own decision. This is something I don't like, and I don't want to see this, and I don't like it. That's fine, and that's great. And when people tell me that, I say, great, because too many bullfights are sold out, and we need more people like you.
So, talk a bit about what it was that took you to Spain, and what your experience was of not only immersing yourself in the bullfighting culture, but from what you've told me in the past, there's an element of convincing people to allow you to immerse yourself to that degree as a somewhat of an outsider to that world. Yeah. And I think that that's not unique to the bullfighting world, and I think it would be interesting to hear about how that plays out.
Breaking into the bullfighting world.
Yeah.
As a journalist, bullfighting journalism. So, well, after that experience in Quito, I knew that I had to see bullfighting again. I knew I had to go to a bullfight again. It's just, when was it going to happen? And it didn't happen until about 5 years later, when I was working as a correspondent in Bogota. And it was actually outlawed at the time in Bogota, or prohibited through sort of bureaucratic means from happening which is now, they've returned, bullfighting has returned to Bogota, and really terrific fighters go there now again. So it was just a short lapse. And so I was in Bogota for 2 years, and I wanted to write about bullfighting, and I was writing about a lot of different things, political stuff, military, security, travel. I was covering a wide variety of issues for different international publications. And the bullfights were happening in Medellin in February. And there's basically 3 big cities in Colombia for bullfighting. 4. Bogota, Medellin, Cali, and Manizales.
Okay.
Yeah. And where they have wonderful festivals and the top bullfighters. Now there's bullfighting is done in other places, but those are the top plazas of Colombia. And I went to Medellin, and I went to 2 bullfights, but I spent a couple weeks reporting the story, because as a journalist, what I like about something I'm interested in is I want to do a deep dive. So I talked to the plaza director. I went to the Achuri Viejo ranch outside of Bogota, and happened to be that Cesar Rincon, the famous Colombian bullfighter who triumphed 4 Sundays in in Madrid Plaza during his heyday. Like no one has replicated that. He was there, and I got to chat with him, and I got to talk to some bullfighting aficionados, Colombian and French, who were visiting. And I spoke to some Colombian bullfighters, and I started to sort of understand this. And I interviewed a lot of aficionados, Colombian aficionados, who told me about bullfighting in Colombia. And I wrote a story that was on the front page of the Miami Herald, maybe about 2011 or 2012. And I saw the great Colombian bullfighter Luis Bolivar and many of the top bullfighters of the world in a special benefit fight. Juan del Alamo that triumphed in Madrid last year. I saw Morante de la Puebla. I saw Sebastian Castella, the French bullfighter, who's absolutely fantastic, and I saw a few others there. And I wrote 2 stories. I wrote one for the Herald, and it was about sort of bullfighting in Colombia and the threats to bullfighting. This is kind of like the bullfighting story is always the same in the American media, I think, and in many international publications. It's like, oh, bullfighting is ending. Bullfighting is over. It's done. Too many, and that's the only story that people seem to be interested in. And so
sort of like that old quote that's been attributed to a million people of the rumors about bullfighting's death have been greatly exaggerated or something like that.
There's waves where this has happened. I think I was just talking to Simon Casas, the Plaza director, manager, impresario is what they call in Spanish, of Madrid Plaza, and 4 others. And he was saying, Belmonte was talking about this 60 years ago, the death of the end of bullfighting, and it's not over yet.
Yeah.
Society changes, it fluctuates. There's support, there's less support, but there's a tremendous pride. And it's just, I've talked to bullfighters about this too. It's not about the history. It's not about the tradition, and we have to preserve tradition, because I've talked to the anti-taurinos who say, well, slavery was a tradition. Why don't we just put this in a museum? And it's not about preserving history or tradition. It's a unique art form. It's beauty. It's high emotion that is like no other spectacle. I talked about sort of those range of emotions and beauty that's being created with a live animal, and this incredible skill and the threat of death. And there are a lot of people who have careers that are dangerous, and these are bullfighters, and this is what they want to do. Right. But I wrote these stories in Colombia, and I just sort of scratched the surface of understanding what bullfighting was about. And then I ended up with a government job in Spain, and I continued to report freelance stories, and I said Spain is the world capital of bullfighting, and I'm going to write bullfighting stories, and I did. And I thank Cigar Snob for picking up some of those really terrific, giving me the opportunity to really explore bullfighting in a deep and different way by writing a story about bullfighting, the meat of the bull, which I wrote a long history of how the bullfighting began with sort of as the ritual sacrifice of the bull for towns' festivals, and how it was cooked into today's cuisine, all the way to 2-star Michelin chef Mario Sandoval, and the way that he is bringing the bull meat to the white tablecloth restaurant Coque in Madrid, and how delicious and amazing his cuisine is. He's a terrific bullfighting fan. And I also was able to interview top artistic bullfighter Morante de la Puebla, who's an incredible personality, and beautiful to watch. Although I will not call myself a Morantista. There are people who live and die by Morante. I'm not a Morantista, but I do enjoy seeing Morante fight. So how did I break in? Well, I wrote some stories, and it's tough to get those kind of stories published in the States, but I was able to get Miami Herald, El Nuevo Herald, and you guys, Outside Magazine. And then I realized, I loved watching bullfighting, and I had my dad's 82 Volkswagen camper van, and I was driving all around Spain in my free time, going to bullfights, and realizing that as I followed certain bullfighters, I ended up in these small towns in wine country, medieval villages, beautiful landscapes, really delicious regional cuisine, wonderful wines of Spain, because Spain has these tremendous wines in about 30 wine regions, and they taste different, and they're delicious, and they're 8, 10, 12 euros, 15 euros. Like, and this is the best wine in Spain. And it's just absolutely phenomenal.
No, we're very lucky here in Miami that there is because of the heavy Latin population, and especially Cubans who maybe came from Cuba with whose parents or grandparents had been born in Spain. The Spanish cuisine is very much alive here, and part of the ancillary benefit is that you go into any liquor store, and I think we get a better selection of Spanish wines than you might in a lot of other markets. So I can imagine that aspect to that was sort of a nice side benefit of diving deep into bullfighting is all the wine that you were able to sample while you were floating around there.
And I'll tell you, I would follow the bullfighters and discover these little rincones, these little corners of Spain, these tiny pueblos, like off the beaten track. And I'd ask people at the bullfight, hey, where should I eat tonight? And they'd tell me, oh, this restaurant, this is what you need to order. And I made good friends. One of my closest friends is from Rioja, and many, many fights we've gone to together.
Yeah.
And he's a Morantista, I'm sorry to say. But and so I realized that, I've discovered Spain by following the bullfighters, the bulls, And I said, what an interesting concept, for a book, because I've written stories and I want to do more, but it's kind of the market's tapped. Once someone has written the bullfighting story, the one-off bullfighting story, they're not going to write it again for 5 years, And so I said, rather than struggle to rewrite the same story in a new publication, I'm going to write a book. And I said, if I can get press credentials in Las Ventas Plaza, the top bullfighting plaza in the world in Madrid. And I brought in some of my clips, and I sent letters, and I made calls, and I pushed, and I got libre circulación, free movement, free range during San Isidro Festival, which is 31 straight days of bullfights. And I did that last year. And I didn't go to all of them, but I went to many of them. And there, I was able to go to the Patio de Cuadrillas, that's like a tunnel where the bullfighters and their teams gather in the minutes before they step on the sand, before the bullfight starts, and see them in this sort of stoic, concentrated state, stretching, talking quietly with their cuadrillas, imagining, or even if they allowed me to ask them 2 questions, talking to them briefly, taking portrait photographs of them in the Patio de Cuadrillas of Las Ventas, it's a beautiful place because they have these red bricks in the background.
Sure.
You always tell where that shot is taken. And anyway, and asking a bullfighter, what are you thinking about before he steps on the sand in the top bullfighting plaza in the world to fight a 1,300-pound bull that could kill him? What is going through your mind? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? And then I asked a few other questions, different bullfighters at different times, and then I started to make contacts. I made journalistic contacts, photographic contacts. In the cuadrilla, the mozo de espadas, the person who guards the swords for the bullfighter, his manager, perhaps, different people. And I'm very, very fortunate because of my interest in bullfighting, and I noticed there's a class that's taught at the Complutense, Madrid University, on bullfighting journalism. It's a 250-hour graduate level class in the evenings, and I was accepted. And I'm the only American to have graduated from this class in its 16 or 17 years of existence. I'm very, very thankful to Miguel Ángel Moncholi, the great bullfighting TV radio journalist who heads that class, for selecting me. And I did the class, and I learned a tremendous amount. It opened many doors for me. And then once I had that press credential, I said, I'm doing this book. And I built the contacts. I had these tremendous experiences. I watched the bullfighters close up, firsthand, all over Spain, because I decided what I wanted to do was I wanted to expose, an American audience to Spain through the eyes of bullfighters from different regions. So I selected bullfighters with really unique, different styles and personalities from different regions, and I did long-form interviews with 13 bullfighters from different regions of Spain, and we always did portrait photography in their region, or in their homeland too. So I've got terrific action shots of them in the plazas, and I always tried to see them in their home region fighting too. So I've been to the top plazas from Pamplona, Valencia, Seville, and in the smaller plazas, like beautiful tiny plazas in little places like Olivenza, Aro in La Rioja, Logroño. I went to the wonderful plaza in País Vasco in the Basque country in Bilbao. I was all over, and so I had the top tier plaza experience, the medium plaza experience, the small plaza experience, in different regions where that bullfighter is celebrated, where he's the hometown bullfighter. And I spoke to them about bullfighting, about their life, about their style, about what their fears are, about what they're thinking, about what their successes and failures are. And bullfighters are incredibly deep, thoughtful, poetic people. And in my career, 15-year career as a journalist, writing about all kinds of different things, the interviews with bullfighters are the most intriguing interviews I've ever done. And we always talked about the tourism side.
Yeah.
And we talked about, why are you proud to be from Extremadura, Madrid, Seville, Jerez, Córdoba, Granada, País Vasco, all these different places. And they talked to me about their favorite local regional cuisine, the favorite. What I discovered is most bullfighters actually don't drink. So I asked them about wines, and very few could tell me authoritatively about wines, but some did, and they had their preferred labels and their preferred regional wines. But many of them told me their favorite restaurants, their favorite historical places, the beautiful landscapes that inspire them, that bring them peace and tranquility. What do they do to be calm? These are life. These are human stories.
Yep.
And this is success and failure. These are people striving after self-actualization. They're also incredibly powerful personalities with huge egos. And so you have to build a rapport and trust, and then with that comfort level, allow them to open up. And my shortest interview was an hour, and my longest interviews have been entire days on their ranches.
Yeah.
And just talking or drinking wine, most recently with Diego Ordiales in La Rioja. But I spent an entire day, about 8 or 9 hours, with Miguel Angel Pereira, who's a tremendous fighter. I mean, two very different styles, beautiful in their own right. And I love watching both those fighters fight, and I've even sort of developed some sort of bonds of trust with some bullfighters who they follow me on Twitter at Abraham Toros, or on Instagram, which is the same Abraham Toros, or we exchange WhatsApp messages. I can message them, I can call them, I can ask their opinion about something. Like there's a young woman, novillera, which is when you fight bulls that are less than 4 years old, named Rocio Romero, who I interviewed, from Córdoba. And I watched her fight in La Flecha, which is near Valladolid, and it was an exciting, tremendous fight, beautiful, powerful, exciting, artistic, and she was injured. She was passing a difficult bull, an unpredictable bull, very close, because she was fighting alongside some of the top bullfighters of Spain. And she knew there would be attention. I've spoken to her many times. I've interviewed her twice. We did a photo shoot in Córdoba recently. And she's still striving to establish herself and to make a name for herself and to become a matador de toros. Yeah? Because she's a novillera, which is like the second sort of stage of making it to matador, which is an incredibly hard thing to do. And she was a bull. Caught her and threw her in the air, and it didn't gore her, but she fell. When she fell, she broke her ankle, and immediately all these top tier, incredible bullfighters who were so excited to see her succeed rushed out there. The first person to get there was Juan José Padilla, Pirata, who is a tremendous popular bullfighter who's in his final year of fighting right now. He's most known for having lost an eye bullfighting. He's called Pirata because he wears an eye patch. And he got there first, and he lifted her up, and he carried her to the nursing station to be treated. And I was able to call him and discuss that with him. And I asked him, describe to me her artistry, describe to me her style of fighting, and then tell me about, what's the role of women bullfighters today. I mean, have they broken down the barriers that Cristina Sanchez faced in the 90s? Cristina Sanchez is the only matador de toros to fight in Madrid Plaza. And I was fortunate enough to be able to have an hour and a half with Cristina Sanchez about a week ago. It's on my Instagram, the photos and some of the things that she told me. An incredibly impressive person, powerful, strong personality, who was a great fighter during a very short period of time, who actually came back to fight one time in 2016 at age, I think, 47, and a tremendous triumph in Cuenca that everybody is so impressed with, and she did it. She wanted her children to see her fight. She kind of got this idea. She was offered this opportunity to benefit cancer patients and that type of thing. And so she went out there. She trained for 6 months, she was telling me. She went out there and fought again, and it was beautiful and incredible, and she triumphed. When you triumph in bullfighting, it's like you have a very beautiful fight. The plaza president can award you 1 or 2 of the ears of the dead bull. It's sort of this trophy that signifies your success. And she cut 3 ears that day. And so her son, she told me this. Her son had told her beforehand, Mom, if you triumph today, I want to carry you out on my shoulders. And she said, okay, well, the pressure's on.
Yeah.
Right?
Right, yeah.
And then, so she cut 2 ears on the first bull, and that means triumph. And she told me, with tears in her eyes while we were talking, she told me she looked at her son and nodded, and that was it. And then you could look at the photos online, Cristina Sanchez from Cuenca, being carried out, triumph on the shoulders of her son. It's an incredible spectacle.
Yeah, it's an incredible
moment. And I interviewed authors and critics and ranchers and plaza directors and of course, like I said, the 13 long form interviews with bullfighters from different regions for this book.
So I want to get into you brought up some of the emotion that these bullfighters experience when they triumph, or when they have a successful day in these plazas, and I want to get into how that relates or translates for an American audience if you're trying to tell these stories for an American or an English-speaking audience that might not be as familiar with that. Yeah. But before we do that, doubling down on the sponsor situation here, this is a little bit self-promotional because this is a read for my partner, who my partner in date. I'm married to a woman, but I have a business partner who's a man. Carlito's Way. My friend Carlos, who is also my partner here at Dade, is a big fan of puns. And so he has launched his own brand of whey protein. Carlito's Way, W-H-E-Y. Most people think all protein is the same. It is not. Imagine pulling up to a gas station with more than 50 pumps, each with a different quality of fuel and each with a different price. That's the protein marketplace, and it is confusing. Some of the world's top athletes use this same protein, in other words, what's in Carlito's Way, whey protein powder, as a recovery supplement. With that in mind, their philosophy is, why take chances? So in other words, go to where successful people go for their whey protein. You can get 2 pounds of this stuff for $57.87, so you're mixing that into smoothies and all that kind of stuff, whatever people who are healthier than me are doing. You can follow him on Instagram at Carlitos_Whey, that's W-H-E-Y, _protein. If you're not there for the protein, stick around for all the whey puns. He's a big fan of those. So Wednesdays are Weigh In Wednesdays, W-H-E-Y, Weigh In. See what he did there?
I love puns.
So he's sort of doubling down on, he's sort of double use of the Instagram account, so you can kind of follow his own fitness journey as he uses his own stuff. So he trusts it enough to be accountable with, like, hey, I'm taking this stuff and let's see if it works. I think today he weighed in, having lost just under 5 pounds in the last week. Not bad.
So you lose weight with this stuff.
Well, you can, or it can be like a muscle building thing or whatever. But I'm not the guy to go to for
Okay,
the
well,
for the science behind the
follow
whey
the
protein.
Instagram.
But yeah,
maybe I get him to follow me. I'll follow him.
there you go,
and
yeah.
I'll learn about this.
So you can, and also you can get the stuff and learn more about the product at carlitoswheyprotein.com. That's Carlitos, WHEY protein.com. All right. So some of the things that come to mind when you talk about some of the emotion, and there's even controversy within Spain about some of the humane or not humane, whatever aspects of bullfighting is the attitudes toward things like dogfighting in the U.S. And it's obviously different because I don't think the U.S. really has a tradition of any spectacle that involves man versus animal, right? You're usually pitting animal versus animal, but I think here there are a lot of people who might look to bullfighting and see it as enough of an analog that they're turned off for some of the same reasons. And then there are communities that might not be. Like I imagine, a lot of Caribbeans who are very used to and see things like cockfighting as being an integral part of their culture, or at least in certain regions of Cuba and the Dominican Republic, might not be as squeamish. So when you're telling these stories, because I imagine that maybe the principal audience for a book in English will be in the U.S., who are you reaching out to? Who are you trying to get to pick this stuff up?
Yeah.
And what are some of the things that you keep in mind as you tell these stories to audiences for whom it might all be much more alien than in Spain?
Right. Well, I mean, that's kind of why I thought that the approach is going to be sort of Spain through the bull. I haven't come up with a title yet, but sort of one of the things that I've thought about is Spain through the eyes of bullfighters, of like modern bullfighters from different regions of Spain, and they're talking about their regions. They're talking about the beauty of Spain, because that's how I discovered Spain, was traveling around to these bullfights and see these fighters. And so we always talk about their region, the cuisine, the charms, the beauty, the solitude, the wonderful, exciting, the festivals, because bullfights happen during festivals times, And when you mention, some of the controversy about bullfighting, bullfighters talk about that a lot, but it's important to think back at the history of bullfighting, which is sort of this Mediterranean tradition that's in different forms for 2,000 years. The modern form of bullfighting is only this very regimented 3-act style is only 150 years old. But it's bullfighting is the killing of the bull is a ritual sacrifice of an animal for a festival.
Yeah.
So the bull is sacrificed, and then the people feast. And even today, all bulls are sold. The meat is already sold before the bull fights. And there's refrigerated trucks waiting, and in some plazas they slaughter them there, and in other plazas they take it to the matador and they slaughter it there. But the bull meat is sold and it's consumed. And the bulls live 4 or 5 years in the campo, in the fields, with a tremendous range where the ranchers try their best to not touch, to not bother the bull at all, because they don't want a human influence on the bull. When the bull enters the plaza, they want that experience to be totally unique, that it's never had any kind of human contact, very, very little human contact, so that it acts in its natural, aggressive, intense spirit, which these animals are naturally fierce, aggressive animals.
Sure.
So, for example, many people say, many bullfighters, ranchers tell me that the uniqueness of the bull as an animal is that when injury is inflicted on it, like in that first act of the bullfight, when there's the bullfighter on horseback with the lance, and the bull wants to attack, and the way to measure the bravura, the braveness, the intensity, the aggression of the bull, is to see if it not only how hard it charges and attacks that horse, which is wearing this heavy, heavy protective coat.
Yeah.
But after the bullfighter on horseback hits it with the lance up here in its sort of upper back shoulder area, with this short blade, does it retreat or does it attack harder? And most bulls, almost all bulls, attack harder, again and again and again. And unlike an animal that would, but where it's inflicted injury or it's harmed or it senses danger, retreats and goes away. The bull is aggressive and attacks and charges harder. And that's just kind of an idea of what the natural inclinations of a toro bravo, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, people talk a lot about the 4 or 5 years that it lives in the campo, free ranging, and the best diet, because the interest of the rancher is that this animal be in top condition, beautiful, perfect health, strong, with really nice, beautiful horns, and this is its weapon, right?
Yeah, which is analogous in a lot of ways to sort of like top tier cockfights.
Okay.
Where even so in the Dominican Republic, for example, and my exposure to this has been through Cigar Snob. There's it goes so far as not only some of that pampering of the animal, because and a lot of this is a profit driven thing, right? I mean, there's no spectacle to sell if the bull, or in this case the rooster, is not a formidable animal, right? Like,
right.
You want to see a show, and it goes so far as there's a particular process of curing and fermenting tobacco, where some of these people in the Dominican Republic will chew tobacco so that they spit it out almost like in a spray. And so the idea is that like the tobacco is strengthening the rooster, and they're like spraying tobacco spit at the rooster through their mouths and this whole thing. So throughout the life of the rooster, and I imagine in a similar way, of the bull, it's not just like, oh, we had him in a pen and then threw him in no, this is a long buildup to the point where it's a bull worthy of, let's say, a Morante or whomever it may be.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, different ranchers have different techniques for raising the bulls. I've heard that some ranchers run their bulls. Some of them just allow them to be totally free.
Yep.
But the bulls are strong. They're in their natural state. They're fighting with each other. They're trotting. They're running. They're exercising. There's different things. So they come into the plaza in this experience that they've never had before. But they're at the top, the peak physical condition. And plazas have a dozen. The top plaza has like a dozen veterinarians. I've met several of them. I've interviewed many of them, and it'll be in the book, their comments and their experiences and that. And obviously, they're all of the bulls are checked out before to make sure that they're like in perfect condition. The bulls are not injected or treated or harmed in any way ahead of time. And part of that is because they've been bred to be, over centuries, they've been bred to be the fiercest possible bull that can be.
Right. Whether you like the end result or not, there is a fascinating history and even a craft element to breeding and raising these bulls.
Yeah, and it's actually, so when some friends and family have come out to visit me in Spain, as I learned through my class, it's really important not to just go to a bullfight, but to sort of experience what the whole sort of life cycle or ambiente, mundo del toro, the world of the bull is like. So I take them to a ranch. Mm-hmm. We see how the bull lives. We maybe talk to a bullfighter, talk to a rancher. We learn a little bit about that. We go to the bullfight, and we experience sort of like the bull, the way it lives. We see it in the campo, the way they practice the young bulls and the cows and decide how to breed them, or if they're going to go to be slaughtered. And then we see the bullfight, and so you're much more informed about that experience, about what the way the bull is living. And many bullfighters talk about this too. It's like these animals are not in a tiny pen for 2 years, unable to move, eating sort of a feed. Mm-hmm. They're free range, roaming, and that's a beautiful thing. And yes, they are ultimately killed, but all animals for domestic consumption are killed.
Yeah.
And these animals are killed in a plaza, and really in that last 2 minutes where the bullfighter plunges a sword into its back and it dies. Now, it's not always perfect. Sometimes the sword is in the bull, 30 seconds it's down, it's dead. Sometimes it's not done right. It hits a bone. It misses something, and it's prolonged. And that's ugly for everybody. People don't go to bullfights because they like blood or death or suffering or any of those things. They go for the beauty, for the spectacle, for the emotions, for the artistry, for all of those elements.
Yeah.
And nobody likes it when it's the kill is not done perfectly.
Yeah. I mean, I think in that sense, maybe it's in some ways comparable to boxing or MMA, right? Which a lot of people think of as like blood sport or whatever. But I don't know anybody who watches, for example, a UFC fight because they like seeing somebody get hurt. You're watching for the athleticism and that one-on-one competition. And yeah, of course, sometimes the consequence or the cost that everybody involved, from the competitors to the spectators, is that somebody does get hurt. But that's not what anybody's getting off on here.
Right. No, and I've talked to, in my Miami Herald story, I wrote about it because I interviewed I went to there's always a little group of people, and this is actually a big problem because the media is portraying like the 20 or 50 or maybe 100 people who are protesting as sort of equal to the 16,000 that are inside the plaza.
Right.
And, they're getting equal time or more time in media. And they're saying, I remember in Colombia, someone said, these people are... They support the paramilitaries. They want to see blood. They want to see death. They want to see torture. Well, that's not it at all, And I mean, it's high emotion. It's beautiful. It's artistry. There's tradition to it. It's a ritual sacrifice. The animals are killed for the meat, and they're raised with tremendous care. And it's a beautiful form of art that you can only really experience in the plaza.
Yeah.
You could watch some YouTube videos and see kind of what it's like for a bullfighter to pass a bull very closely and beautifully, and that's tremendous and that's nice to see. But like the experience of being in the plaza with the pageantry and the suits and the traditional the bullfighter as he tips the montera to the plaza president and the capote de paso, this beautiful ornate capotes that they wear when they first walk in the pasillo across the sand, and then the olés, the yell of olé as a wonderful, beautiful, close pass is executed in an excellent way. It's exciting. It's a charge. It's an emotion, and you can only really experience that in the plaza, in that place. I mean, in the sun, in the afternoon, in Spain. I mean, I've gone to bullfights in Mexico, Ecuador, in Colombia, and France as well, and it's beautiful there too. I mean, it's different and it's wonderful, But and if you're not sure, or if you're just like, no way, I would like that. Well, I invite you to go and then say, I did it. I don't like it.
Sure.
And I'm not out to convince anybody. In fact, I've stopped really engaging in like the anti-Taurino argument. I mean, if you feel like you don't like it for such and such reasons, that's totally fine. And I tell people, that's fine if you don't want to go, because there are too many bullfights that are sold out.
Mm-hmm. So let's let people know on that note. Number one, where, if they don't have immediate plans to go to Spain, where they might go, be it online or on TV, to consume or to kind of sort of see some of what you've been talking about. Yeah, and also where they can follow you.
Well, I would say that, this is the big challenge, right? Is how do you put something so emotional, so sensory into words? Yeah. And, I've read a lot of the historical books that have been over the last 150 years that have tried to put bullfighting into words. Yeah, and of course, Ernest Hemingway, who is controversial in Spain. Some people really greatly appreciate what he did to project Spain and bullfighting around the world and expose the world to that. Some of the top aficionados don't think he was a true aficionado, like the most educated in the art of bullfighting, but some do, and so it's very controversial. But that's sort of Spanish culture. But I would say I mean, you could read some of my stories where I try to put it into words, and I use the words of bullfighters because I try to let them describe
Sure.
what bullfighting is like, and you could go online, you could watch some YouTube videos. I tell people, go see one of the top, most incredible bullfighters in history, who's far above the other bullfighters right now, and rarely ever fights, this mystical sort of hermetic figure, Jose Tomas. And I just saw him fight in Algeciras, and then 2 years ago in 2016, I saw him fight in Jerez, and it's just sublime to see him because he is completely stoic, and he can call the bull from 80 feet away with the slightest of movements of the muleta, and the bull comes galloping, charging to him. And I've had people describe to me, like a plaza surgeon told me, and the Madrid plaza surgeon told me, he puts his body where the bull wants to be. And with his strength of confidence and in himself and his style and what he knows about bulls, he knows the bull's not going to hit him. And the bull does hit bullfighters many times. But it's incredible and it's beautiful to see the bull pass so close to the body. And this is the high emotion of bullfighting, is like this beauty, this art, and that level of emotion is only possible because there's the danger of death.
Yeah. All right. So again, we can follow you at Abraham Toros.
Yes.
On both Instagram and Twitter, correct?
Yes, that's
and that's
right.
Without underscores or any of that stuff.
No, that's right.
Okay, cool. So Abraham Toros on Instagram and Twitter. Follow Abraham for any updates on the book project, and I imagine like all the stuff that you're doing in the lead up, right?
That's right. I've been I started the Twitter about a year ago, and I put up actually all through this San Isidro festival in Madrid, which is 31 straight days of bullfighting in Madrid. I wrote all the bullfights that I went to. I wrote like commentaries about, a very brief commentary about what I observed, and I put a few pictures up. But also every time I did an interview, a photo shoot with a bullfighter in a beautiful old part of Spain, in Granada, in Cordoba, in Extremadura, in Seville, in Jerez, in Madrid, in Rioja, in the wine region. I had professional portrait photographers shooting, me doing the interviews, the bullfighter portrait shots, and then my bullfighting shots, some commentary, my interviews with top plaza directors and managers, ranchers, historians, aficionados, journalists. And so now, as I enter the phase of basically completed the interviewing, and I have all the material for the top bullfighters that will be sort of the protagonist of each chapter, I'm in the phase of sort of assembling the book. As I go through those interviews again, I'm going to be posting more photos and little bits of golden nuggets of great material that they've told me to promote the book. And I'm also going to look to do some YouTube videos where I just talk about bullfighting and little snapshots.
Very cool.
So that's kind of the idea.
That's been this episode of the Dade podcast. You can follow us on Twitter this is a little more complicated than your stuff, Twitter at Dade Tweets, Instagram Dade IG. You can find our website at dademag.com. And if you want to become a patron, you can go to patreon.com/dademag and support what we're doing here for as little as $1 a month. There are some other tiers above that where you might get some, special perks if you want to support us beyond the $1 a month. We also have some exclusive content for people who support us on Patreon. So check all that out. Patreon.com/dademag, dademag.com, where, by the way, we have more than just podcasts. There's some op-eds. There's some all kinds of stuff. Very good. Very exciting things are happening all over the place.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah,
I might just give you that $1 right now. If
Right.
you don't mind.
All right. So thanks a lot for watching or listening. By the way, you can also find us on YouTube. And until next time, I'm Nick Jiménez. I've been joined by Abraham Mahshie.
Thank you so much.
And go buy yourself some dog bandanas and whey protein. All right.